Motivation advice doesn't fail because you're lazy. It fails because it assumes you already know what you should want. Every productivity hack, every hustler's mantra, every slogan about how discipline beats motivation quietly smuggles in a moral claim. This is worth pursuing. This is the right direction. But if your direction is wrong, more motivation is not going to help. It just gets you lost even faster. That's the uncomfortable truth most motivation content never addresses. Because at the end of the day, motivation always collapses into personal judgment about priorities, values, and your orientation. That's why the most honest motivational advice ever given is also the least satisfying and most simplistic. You do you. Different people start from different places. They have different constraints, goals, risk tolerances, and end states, or no end state at all. And motivation is never transmitted cleanly. In physics, when two signals combine, the result is not just a neat overlay. Yes, part of the outcome is simple superposition, that is, adding the signals to each other, but another part comes from interaction terms, distortions and interference. The combined waveform is shaped by how the signals collide, not just by their individual strengths. Motivation works in a similar way. Advice doesn't arrive in isolation. It interacts with temperament, history, incentives, and unresolved conflicts. That's why the same book can transform one person's life and leave another feeling vaguely irritated, energized for a week, and then unchanged. Take Think and Grow Rich. Napoleon Hill's framework assumes something very specific, that accumulating wealth is a primary life objective. For someone who already agrees with that premise, then, the book feels revelatory. But who does it actually work for? It works for people already aligned with Hill's worldview, his mental inner circle. That's a relatively small group who share similar aspirations, backgrounds, and definitions of success. That scale made sense in earlier societies, that is, small towns, stable professions, limited social mobility, but it breaks down in a global, internet-mediated civilization with billions of people, radically different incentives, and wildly different life constraints. Most motivation advice isn't wrong, but rather it's overfitted. Jordan Peterson tells you to clean your room, stand up straight with your shoulders back, and take responsibility. He explains dominance hierarchies, evolutionary psychology, and the tension between order and chaos. Much of that advice is genuinely valuable, but after you've done all of it, after you've organized your space, stabilized your habits, and taken responsibility, a quieter question emerges. Now what? Because discipline isn't purpose, and order isn't inherently meaning, and responsibility doesn't automatically tell you where to aim. If you're oriented correctly, you feel it. But if you're only following someone else's framework, you eventually hit a wall where momentum runs out, and then uncertainty returns. No author, no speaker, and no motivational figure knows your life. They didn't grow up where or how you did. They don't share your biological constraints, your environment, or your trade-offs. Eventually, every motivational system hands the burden of direction right back to you. Today, motivation isn't just advice, it's an industry. Courses, masterminds, inner circles, parties, paywalled access to high net worth networks, quote unquote. And here's the critical shift. Once motivation is monetized, incentives change. Advice becomes optimized not for truth, but for conversion. Urgency replaces the need for wisdom, and exclusivity replaces understanding. Predatory systems don't always chase their prey, because sometimes, like in the case of a Venus flytrap, they simply wait for someone desperate, uncertain, or disoriented enough to step inside voluntarily. This doesn't mean everyone selling advice is malicious, but saturation plus monetization produces a dangerous illusion that consuming advice is itself progress. It feels like movement, without risk, without feedback, and without exposure to failure. But the paradox is that motivation often increases after action, not before it. Trying something, failing, then adjusting, then discovering through friction what you actually value. Books may be able to inform you and videos can inspire you, but neither can tell you what belongs to you. Only lived feedback can do that and steer you in what you know deep down is the correct direction. Another uncomfortable truth is that people are not interchangeable, whether it's height, appearance, temperament, athleticism, cognitive strengths. Unfortunately, these do matter, and ignoring them doesn't make society fairer, it just makes advice less useful. Motivation culture often promises transcendence without admission, but wisdom begins with clarity about what you're working with, not resignation, but orientation, choosing paths that compound with your traits instead of fighting against them. Even when rapid success happens, it rarely delivers what people expect. Many who reach financial escape velocity early discover that meaning doesn't automatically follow money. Without structure, without challenge, and without contribution, freedom will collapse into stagnation. If the only goal is to stop working as soon as possible, the question becomes, what is work for? And what replaces it when it's gone? We don't need louder motivation, we need orientation. We need spaces where people can think together, compare experiences, challenge assumptions, and generate wisdom without ideological closure or sales funnels. Modernity has fragmented us, and efficiency has replaced meaning, and unfortunately, convenience has replaced depth. Digital communities may not be perfect, but for many, they are the last remaining places where genuine intellectual alignment is possible. Motivation advice doesn't fail because people are weak. It fails because it ignores individual values, it ignores constraints, it rewards consumption over action, and it mistakes intensity for direction. You can be deeply motivated and still move the wrong way. What we need isn't another guru, it's a shared orientation of honest dialogue and wisdom built together in real time. This has been Lumen et Ratio, Light and Reason.